To the Daily Objective. Today it's me and Daniel. How's it going, Daniel?
Not just us.
It's not just us.
I'm asking, is it not anymore just the two of
Oh,
us?
I see. Oh, Daniel, I didn't. I've offended Daniel by saying we are just. We're just employees here. That's all we are. Um, so it's day 136 of the war in Israel, and we're going to be focusing today on some comments which have been made by the Brazilian president. His full name, if I'm getting it rightly, is Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, but people just seem to refer to him as Lula. Um, we're going to talk about his comments and then talk about the wider trend that his comments kind of represent, and why I don't think it's appropriate to make these kind of comments. So, in particular, he basically has made comments which have been made by many people since the start of the war, comparing Israel's actions to the Holocaust or comparing Israel to the Nazis. So, specifically, he said that the war in Gaza is between a highly prepared army and women and children, and what is happening in the Gaza Strip with the Palestinian people has no parallel in any other historical moments. In fact, it did. It did when Hitler decided to kill the Jews. So a very clear, unabashed comparison to the Nazis there and to the Holocaust. Um, and I've got a fair bit to say about why I don't think this is an okay or tasteful or moral thing to go around saying. But Daniel, what was your reaction on hearing this kind of thing?
Well, I'd like to say surprised, but there's few things that surprise me. Uh, we talked about Lula before, specifically when during the presidential election, where we had someone from Brazil to talk about it. Brazil didn't really have an easy choice. Both sides seemed incredibly bad, even some might say even worse than the choice Americans will have. But they decided on Luna, and yeah, this is what we're getting. So as I was saying about being surprised, I checked out if he made some earlier comments, and he did make the exact same comment. So I'm surprised. I wasn't able to find any big outrage back then, which was
Mhm.
surprising to me. Maybe it's just because the news is overwhelmed now with what's coming out now. Uh, but I
So when
didn't.
did he make the earlier comments?
So there were two specific comments that I will mention, but one was on the October 25th, which funnily
Okay.
enough was when a popularity poll came out, and apparently his popularity was falling, and right after that he made those comments. I'm
Right.
not trying to say that he made them to raise his popularity, but we might talk a little bit maybe about the anti-Semitism in Brazil. But yeah, basically I'm not sure. Oh yeah, I have the exact statement. So on October 25th, he said, "It's not a war, it's genocide that has killed nearly 2,000 children who have nothing to do with this war. They are victims of this war, and frankly, I don't know how a human being is capable of war, knowing that the result of that war is the death of innocent children." Which one comment I would make just on that is why is like immediately Israel being blamed for it? Because this comment because it should be applied to Hamas, who actually started it, who actually did n not just kill children, but specifically target children and even kidnap children. So yeah, like I said, there's few things that surprise me anymore about this conflict.
Yeah, it's even I seem to be saying on almost every show that about how I'm shocked or surprised by something or that something is extraordinary. And yet even I'm finding that my capacity to be shocked by these kinds of things is getting blunted over time. Um, but yeah, so I also in looking for sort of contextual things around this was Googling and YouTubing for these kind of comments, and I came across one that which came from the ANC, the African National Congress, about this, and I clicked on it because I thought, oh, I hadn't seen that they'd made this comment, and yet then I very quickly realized the video was 10 years old, and that it was exactly the same. The description for the video could have been written just last week because it was about a ground invasion in Gaza from 2014. Um, and then very quickly found another one from 5 years ago. So there's a tremendous kind of tradition, should we say, of Israel's enemies making this comparison. I wouldn't be surprised if they go back much further. I just can't think of a particular example off the top of my head.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, I mean, as a preparation to this, a good friend of our channel, Kirk Wilcox, actually has a video about uh yeah, the idea that not all anti-Israel is anti-Semitism or something along those lines. And yeah, when you watch the video, it feels like it just came out yesterday. Everything that was said could easily be applied. People use from river to the sea like it doesn't mean what it actually means. The U.S. politicians, I mean, he specifically talked about the politicians like uh, uh, I can't remember those two names, but you know who I'm talking about.
Mhm.
Rashida Tlaib and who is Omar. I
Ilhan
can
Omar?
Johan Omar. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I mean, yeah. It really feels like for those people, it doesn't really matter what's actually happening on the ground. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It's just there's this thing called America Bad policy, where basically whatever conflict happens, your response is just America Bad. And it's pretty much the same applied to Israel. Whatever happens in the Middle East, it's Israel bad. Doesn't matter. The circumstances doesn't matter at the end of the day for them.
Yeah, exactly. Just as maybe a bit more groundwork laying for people. This was made at a conference in Africa and has provoked a fair bit of outrage, as you might imagine, from the Israeli administration. So the Israeli Foreign Secretary, Katz, I believe his name, said that the Brazilian president would be persona non grata in Israel until he withdrew the comments, and it also provoked likewise similar kind of outrage from Netanyahu. Um, and unfortunately, the Israeli administration has to deal with a lot of these kind of comments. And I guess we should just maybe lay out for people why exactly it is that you shouldn't go around comparing the Israelis to Nazis. I would have thought that's pretty obvious, and I think actually it is pretty obvious, which is maybe gonna what I will come round back round to. But so Israel, for anyone who
Yeah,
doesn't know,
I mean, just
yeah,
because I have one point before we go to the Hitler comparison, basically.
sure,
He also mentioned, I'm trying to find the exact quote. So he said, "It's not a war. Uh, it's not a war of soldiers against soldiers. It's a war between a highly prepared army and women and children." Uh, and then he goes to the comparison to Nazis.
yeah,
Uh, and I feel like in some sense he's right. In a sense, it is the war against the Palestinian people because they support those regime. But again, this comparison that all of Gaza is just infants and women, this like
mhm,
crazy view of Gaza, saying, I mean, what is he trying to say? That there are no militants there? That all
yeah,
militants are like children in super young age and women? And again, this saying that women are somehow like just because they're a woman, it means like they cannot be militants. I mean,
yeah,
IDF has women. I imagine Hamas probably maybe not. I don't know how they have it specifically with militants if they have like actual women as militants, but they definitely the at least the civilian women definitely were involved in the October 7th, not to mention the celebration afterwards. And I don't view women as having any less volition or agency than men.
yeah. You're a real feminist about how you handle this. Yeah, I mean, look, in a lot of these Middle Eastern societies, which are Islamist societies, so when they're ruled by an authoritarian Islamist government, um, although perhaps it's not probably going to be the case that the women are serving in the military, we know very much about the phenomena of the morality police, who are very much heavily involved, women who are very much heavily involved in that, who are often armed with rifles, who go around enforcing
Yeah,
the
I
yeah
think a friend of mine who is from Iran once told me about it that there is a specific section of the specifically Iranian police which is made up just of women because in Islam basically to enforce a certain laws only women are supposed to enforce it. So it's actually the women who are oppressing other women.
yeah, very much so. And we also know from the war in Afghanistan or Iraq, whatever the justness of those wars, that women had the propensity to be suicide bombers or would send off their children, sometimes holding grenades. Or we know that children are radicalized, or basically indoctrinated from birth, either in UNRWA schools, which we'll be talking about on the reality show afterwards, into these beliefs, or in the most extreme kind of ISIS examples, into training them how to shoot guns and all those kind of things. So, and whilst children are always innocent, women per se aren't. They're, as you say, they make choices just as men do, and they can be judged
Well, I
guilty.
would maybe I would quickly just challenge even the children, because I never know what exactly it means when people talk about children,
Hmm.
because I think even you know if children mean under 18, then I think even 15, 16, 17 year olds can be to a large extent uh morally capable, or morally
Culpable.
culpable for what they do. So it's also this sort of muddying the water of saying children, where it could actually mean just 17.
Yeah.
There's no like magical barrier that suddenly you have full moral responsibility for what you do.
Yes, although, but that's part of a kind of, I guess, a broader discussion about it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when someone becomes fully culpable for those kind of actions. But certainly, I guess just if you're imagining someone under 10, let's say, um, who's been raised in these societies, then they have just been indoctrinated. That and we can't say that they're guilty if they hold anti-Semitic beliefs or anything like that. Um, but yeah, so anything else before we go on to explain why you shouldn't compare Israel to Hitler?
Uh, there is a comment in the chat from a member, so I'm just gonna comment on it. Pro tip: it's really easy to radicalize people when some foreign army invades and occupies their country. Uh, I'm not sure I 100% agree, because we've seen an example of, as we say, Germany and Japan, when there was a longer occupation and it didn't lead to more radicalization. It actually led to de-radicalization. So I think there is definitely a way to do it right,
Yeah,
and
I'm not.
Israel will have to do it right, because it really needs to figure out how to properly de-radicalize all of Gaza.
Yes, I'm not sure exactly how to take the context for that comment, because what it sounded like was saying that people will be radicalized because the Israeli military is there. Is that what the comment was saying?
I recognize the name. I think it's someone who is usually pro-Israel, so I'm not sure. Maybe
Okay,
he will comment more about it.
okay, we'll come back to that. But all right, let's get into the meat of this. Why shouldn't you compare Israel to the Nazis? So just for for people who don't know, Israel was founded in 1948 out of the British Mandate of Palestine, and was founded in the context when just after the Second World War, when the Holocaust had occurred and people were becoming aware of that, the case for the Jewish state, which the Zionist movement had been advocating for what, about 40 years by that point, uh, it suddenly became very real. People suddenly saw there really was a need for a Jewish homeland. And however we might defend the justness or legitimacy of the Israeli government or the Israeli state, being that they're fundamentally civilized, they protect individual rights, the ability for people to live free, flourishing lives. The rationale when Israel was founded was that there needs to be a country that Jews can go to and call home where they're not a persecuted minority, and that was the motivation for a lot of people in helping, especially people in Britain, for bringing about um, the for allowing Israel to come around. And so Israel's coming about from a context of genocide by the Nazis, and everybody knows that. People, I'm saying this. I introduced it as if for anyone who doesn't know, nobody doesn't know that. Maybe 1% of the population somewhere don't know that because they live in basements. I don't know, but everyone knows about this. And so when people are making these comments and these comparisons to the Nazis, they're doing it knowingly. Um, in effect, they know this is in poor taste, and I think they're doing it anyway. It's not. I could understand maybe someone who's confused or is caught up in this kind of thing, maybe says something insensitive once, maybe. I don't even really find that convincing, but let's say you could excuse that once. But this, as we have just said, it goes on for years and was repeated again and again, and it's like they can't stop themselves from saying it. It's the first thing that comes to their mind. Oh, let's compare Israel to the Nazis, and that's it's so it's not just irresponsible. It's disgusting, and it's disgusting on a level of evil because there's a maliciousness to it. There's a desire to exploit the Holocaust and to exploit that I mean, tragedy puts it lightly, but you know what I mean, that awful, awful event in human history, um, to just spit in the eyes of Israel and to advance the cause of a Palestinian state. So Brazilians should not be happy about this. I don't know what anti-Semitism in Brazil is like. I looked up the Jewish population in Brazil. It's fairly small, as you might imagine. It's 120,000 for a country of about 240 million. Um, but this should be the end. If we lived in a just world, or if if public opinion in Brazil were just, this should be the end of this guy's career. The next time election comes around, he's not even an option for him to successfully stand for office. But unfortunately, in so many nations, in my own nation, people make these comparisons, and in the BRICS nations, which maybe we'll talk about a bit, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. This is very, very common. This is almost the kind of standard line you see from a lot of the politicians of those nations. So, unfortunately, people will keep making this comparison, no matter how evil or repulsive it is. Um, how do you feel about it, Daniel?
Uh, so when it comes to specifically using, uh, well, I think there are two sort of ways it could go. I mean, generally, Nazis, Hitler are used as basically the worst thing that ever existed,
Yeah,
rightfully so. And it's used pretty much by everyone to, again, showcase this is the worst thing that's ever happened. But I think it's specifically, I wouldn't dare to say disgusting to use it against uh, Israel and Jews who specifically suffered from it. Uh, I mean, it's oftentimes said the Jewish population has still not recovered from the numbers before the Holocaust.
yeah,
And yeah, again, to use and just a comparison to compare Israel's defending their citizens after the atrocious act, such as October 7th, as genocide.
yeah,
Uh, I mean, what can you say to that? And so when it comes to anti-Semitism in Brazil, because I tried to look it up a little bit, there were a few conflicting stories, so I'm not sure which is exactly true. One said Brazil is one of the least anti-Semitic nations in the world. Another one said that apparently there was a report in 2022 worried about a rise of anti-Semitism, specifically with the who was it, Bolsonaro, the
hmm
other candidate for president.
yeah,
Apparently, there were a lot of associations of anti-Semitism with him and far-right rallies. Uh, so it's really, it's really not great to see that the side that supposedly wasn't anti-Semitism is actually making these comments.
yeah,
And that's what one thing that's really unique about anti-Semitism. It really is sort of almost uniting universal thing. Both sides can unite on one thing, and it's anti-Semitism, or rather the extremes, hopefully.
yeah. So that there's something about anti-Semitism which is peculiar, but as you say, in its almost, I don't want to say universal appeal in that everyone's anti-Semitic, but that its potential appeal to the whole spectrum to the whole political spectrum. Although, as we often speak about, the left like to imagine themselves as being immune from it, perhaps with an eye towards um, times in the past where the left has been better in their support for Israel and Jewish people and so on. They very clearly are not immune from it. And the right, as we know, very, very well, is certainly not immune from anti-Semitism and is much more the wing of the political spectrum which is associated with anti-Semitism. Um, but even just piggybacking off a point you made just a few minutes ago, um, about you said something about to compare Israel's self-defense to genocide. What do you say about that? Even the fact that Israel is doing so much to help the civilians of the other side. Now we have a lot to say about why we think they should be much more forthright in not doing that, and why they should be much more forthright in their own self-defense. But given that they are doing this, that they're going out of their way to drop leaflets, to warn people that a building is about to be bombed, that aid is still, able to go into the Gaza Strip, to some extent, and all this kind of stuff. The fact that they caved international pressure to allow ceasefires, the fact that they'll trade hostages, all this stuff. It's not the actions of a genocidal nation. So it's not, there are absolutely no reason to think that there is a genocide going on. If you think about the genocide that happened in World War II, how mechanized, industrialized it was, how purposeful. I'm not one of these functionalist people who have a view on the Holocaust that it sort of came about by accident. I don't know if there's a kind of debate about the Holocaust with this group called the Functionalists. I don't believe that. I think it was intended all along. Um, if if you look at all of those aspects of the Holocaust, and to the way in which that the Holocaust was continued at the expense of the German war effort, that once Germany started losing, they still allocated more resources to just killing more Jews, to killing as many as they could. You cannot say that then what is going on in Gaza is that Gaza is a concentration camp, or that Gaza is like Treblinka or Sobibor or any of this stuff. It just, you cannot honestly believe that. If you're really trying to look at the situation and come to an understanding based on the facts of what's going on. Maybe someone could be deliberately isolating themselves into only reading certain kinds of news, but then that's just another way of deceiving yourself, isn't it? So there is no excuse for this, and there's no way that really you can apologize enough for it. So as I say, I wish this were the end of this guy's political career and of any politician who makes these kind of comments. But unfortunately, it's not going to be the case. And we're just going to have to keep advocating for the fact that you should not consider it acceptable to make comparisons between the Israelis and Nazis. It just, you can't do it.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, yeah, Holocaust was such a unique kind of evil. Like people really viewed, uh, it's almost hard to imagine how evil people saw the Jewish population. I mean, in my country, Slovakia had pretty sizable Jewish communities. In actually my town, which has I think only like 10,000 people, has a synagogue. It had a huge and thriving Jewish community, which is of course now non-existent because what
Yeah.
happened during Cold War, not it wasn't just that bad that we like put them somewhere away. Slovakia actually paid money to Germany to basically take their Jews. I mean, it's truly horrible. And again, to compare this to Israel's, again, defending itself, there's not a single uh, conflict in the history of Israel that wasn't started by some sort of aggression from the Arab or the Palestinian side. There might be few that where Israel actually premeditated an attack, but even then, that was before that happened, there was some sort of mobilization on the Arab side or some sort of thing that happened to, I think, justify it. So again, like I say, I don't think these people actually care about, making the actual case for it, making, actually proving that what's happening is actually happening. It's just, Israel is bad and that's it. And the stronger language we can use, the better. If we can say Gaza is an open-air prison, it's an apartheid state, Israel is committing a genocide.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it should be no surprise that Lula has been very supportive of South Africa's um, case in the International Court of Justice against Israel. Um, and that's because that case is a smear, and it's designed to smear Israel's reputation and name so that it's on the level of rogue states, pariah states who are kind of cast out from the comity of civilized nations. And the comparison with the Nazis is designed exactly the same way. It is a smear. When I say it's designed, I'm meaning that it's used intentionally. So, like as I say, it's not like people don't know the context that Israel's coming from, and that context is informing why they're using it. So that's why I'm saying it's designed to be used as a smear. And more than just any other smears, as I say, it's designed to be a really hurtful smear. It's designed to draw on that context in a way that's meant to be painful for Jewish people in Israel. So that it's just awful. Should we just do the super chats before we come into the final
Yeah.
few minutes? Sure. So we've got 2.99 from Jonathan Honig. Thank you, Jonathan. And then we have a new channel member, it looks like, called Wandering Jew. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. And then we have 99 cents from Bonnie. Thank you very much, Bonnie. 99 euro. Did they say cents for euros? I guess so.
Yep.
99 cents from Stephen. Thanks. Oh, Stefan. Thank you very much, Stefan. And then $2.99 from Catherine Cassio. Thank you very much, Catherine. Any final thoughts on this story, Daniel?
Well, yeah, basically just to summarize it, at the end of the day, all these comments are actually helping Hamas.
Mhm.
All calls for humanitarian aid are mostly going to support the Hamas war effort. Any sort of calls for ceasefire, any sort of pressure on Israel to basically actually go in and destroy Hamas are going to help Hamas. And there are two sort of motivations I could see from the sort of uh, from that side, and one is less sinister and ignorant, and it's the fact that they actually do consider the Palestinian people and Hamas as two completely distinct things that have nothing to do with each other, and Hamas is just sort of ruling over Palestinians, and Palestinians don't want Hamas. Which I think there is no case for this. But if you're ignorant enough, I think it can be understood. But people like this, like Brazilian president, shouldn't be ignorant, especially when they make such statements. And then there is the more sinister evil that these people actually hate Israel, hate the state of Israel, and would do anything, even support organizations such as Hamas, to try to completely get rid of Israel from the face of this earth.
Yes. It doesn't it it's hard sometimes, I think, to really project the degree of how do you bad intention, I should put that, or bad faith action that there is in the world. Because I think especially if you're not someone with those intentions, you on some level assume that people are fundamentally like you, unless you have a really negative judgment of people generally. Um, but I think when you see so many of these kind of comments being made surrounding Israel, you can't help but see, and so it's difficult sometimes to stay afloat, kind of, I don't know, psychologically, with this, but just you see just how much bad faith there is in the world, and just how much well, actually not even just bad faith, but malicious intentions there are towards the Jews, which is what you were getting at. So yeah, it's depressing, really. So there you go. I don't want to end on a bum note, but it's a depressing story. Um, but okay, everyone. So we've got the reality show coming up in 2 minutes. As I said, we're going to be talking a bit about UNRWA and the countries which are still funding UNRWA, and then we're going to be talking a bit about the BBC and the Labour Party. The BBC Director General has apologised for his stance anti-Semitism. We're going to be looking at some of those comments and judging those as well. So I hope we'll see everyone over there. Thanks for chatting, Daniel. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.